Modern life. Between careers, kids, and health, it can be mayhem. That's why we're here. I'm Dr. Lisa Varghese-Kroll.
And I'm Dr. Lanre Falusi. We're physicians, moms, and longtime friends who break it all down for you. Wondering how to juggle all the balls and still stay sane? Looking for advice but don't want to be overwhelmed?
Curious about how to make the most out of life for your family but enjoy it at the same time? You're in the right place. Welcome to Health and Home with the Hippocratic hosts.
On this episode, Dr. Sylvia Owusu-Ansah joins us to teach you how to save a life with CPR. How does CPR work? Do you have what it takes to help a stranger or a loved one whose heart suddenly stops beating? And what does all of this have to do with playlists and staying on beat? Listen to find out more. Welcome to the show, everyone. Lanre here, and I'm solo today, but Lisa and I, as doctors, and honestly, just as humans, both feel that today's topic is critical for everyone to hear. Few things are more scary than seeing someone suddenly lose consciousness because their heart stopped beating. In that moment, it's natural for panic to set in or to freeze, not knowing what to do. What if instead you are trained on when and how to perform CPR to revive someone's heart? So our question for today is, can you stay on beat and use CPR to save someone's life? Our guest today is Dr. Sylvia Owusu-Ansah, MD, MPH. She is an associate professor of pediatrics and emergency medicine and the medical director of Prehospital and Emergency Medical Services at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center's Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She is also the Associate Vice Chair of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, focusing on creating positive outcomes for the surrounding community and the pre-hospital environment through the lens of justice and equity. As a national leader, she has authored numerous academic papers, media articles, blogs, and posts focused on pediatric emergency care and community-engaged CPR. She has personally taught CPR to over 2,000 community members, including 500 Division I athletes, one of whom credited Dr. Owusu-Ansah's training for making it possible for her to perform CPR on her own father and save his life. Dr. Owusu-Ansah is the creator, CEO, and co-founder of Akoma United, a nonprofit organization focused on providing life-saving skills to under-resourced communities, with a global initiative in Ghana. Her work has been honored with numerous awards, and she has advised top actors and executive producers for medical dramas. Welcome, Dr. Owusu-Ansah.
Thank you, Dr. Falusi and Hippocratic host, for having me. Happy to be here today.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours. All right, so let us jump right into it. What exactly is CPR and how does it work?
So to know what CPR is, you have to know why you use it. And so cardiac arrest is when your heart stops for a myriad of reasons or different types of reasons. Sometimes we don't know why. It can happen to a kid or it can happen to an adult. CPR is a way of reviving the heart and lungs so somebody comes back to life. C stands for cardiac, which represents the heart, which really means heart. P stands for pulmonary, which means lungs, and R stands for resuscitation, which means to bring someone back to life. So CPR is a way of helping to bring someone back to life once their heart has stopped.
Great. So then how does a person know if CPR should be used? Like, how would I know if my loved one or a stranger on the street requires CPR?
That is an excellent question. So ways that we check to see if somebody needs CPR is mainly whether they're breathing or not, or responsive. So the first thing we check for is, let's say you're walking down the street and a jogger goes by you and they collapse in front of you. The first thing you want to do is to check to make sure the scene is safe, because if you want to help somebody out, you want to make sure you're safe and the other person is safe. The next thing you want to do is check to see if they're responsive. Maybe they syncopized or passed out. They were had some dizziness or lightheartedness and they passed out. So you want to make sure that they're really not responsive or out. So you would shake them pretty vigorously and, hey, are you okay? Are you okay? If they're not responsive, the next thing you want to do is to call for help, call 911. And then after that, you want to basically look at their chest, put your ear by their mouth, and see if you feel any air coming from their mouth while you're watching to see if their chest is rising, to see if they're actually breathing or not. If they're not breathing at all, or they're breathing abnormally slow or kind of gasping for air, that is enough indication to do CPR or cardiopulmonary resuscitation on that particular person.
Okay, so that's really helpful. So heart and lungs are really focused on CPR, but the way that you might first want to think about whether they need it is to look to see if they're breathing, and then getting into it. So where do you go from there? So they're not responsive, they're not breathing. What do you do next?
Yeah. So the beauty is, in medicine, we live in this world of acronyms, or we try to simplify things. So I talk about the 3 to 4 C's. So again, you want to check for safety before you even touch anybody or figure out whether they need CPR or not. You want to make sure that the scene is safer. So we say the first C is check for scene safety. Once you recognize that the person's not in the middle of the road, or there's not like a line down, or it's in the middle of a storm, or you're in the middle of the street and you're in a safe spot, then you want to check for responsiveness. Like I said, you want to shake the person and make sure that whether they're responsive or not. Maybe they just passed out and you shake them hard enough and they wake up. So then you don't need to do CPR. The third C is to call 911. So most of us now have devices on us where we can, whether it's a watch or a phone, where we can call 911 easily or press the emergency dial. So you want to call for help in case you do need to help this person, and it may take a long time to help this person. You'll need some kind of medical backup, and that's when you call for 911. The fourth C is you're going to check for breathing. And then the last C is you're going to start CPR. And so we talked about what CPR is, but how do you do it? So anytime you're basically reviving the heart. So you're going to want to pump the heart. You become the heart with your hands. So what we ask people to do is put their arms straight out, locking their elbows. So no bend in the elbows. You're going to interlock your fingers with your arms straight out. You're going to bend, you're going to kneel right next to the person and be as close as you can to the person. Where you've interlocked your hands, you're going to place those hands on what we call the breastbone, the center bone that connects your ribs. You're going to put it towards the end of that, in between the nipples. Now, if it's a male, in between the nipples is pretty reliable, but in a female with breasts that may, lay flat, that kind of line is obscured. So you want to make sure you feel the base of that breastbone. Put your two hands there and push. You're going to push hard, you're going to push fast, and you're going to do 100 to 120 beats per minute. And you're going to do it either till the person wakes up or till you're able to get some help.
Great. So push hard, push fast. I feel like that is a message that we've heard a lot in, media and PSA. So that's really good to emphasize. And then at the point where you're pushing hard, pushing fast at 100 and 120 times per minute, how do you then know that you should stop?
Yeah, and so that's a very good question. There's only two reasons to stop, which can sound very challenging, and those two things are, if you get help. That's why you want to call 911 at the beginning of this to get help. So when EMS arrives and when EMS says they can take over CPR. So EMS can arrive and pull up in an ambulance. You still want to do CPR because you basically have become the heart for that person and you want to keep the heart pumping. So that's when you get help and somebody takes over your CPR, that's when you stop. The other is if the person actually wakes up. So if you notice that the person starts breathing in a normal type of fashion, they may not be thrashing around, like Hollywood style, or pop up and scare you, but they may. Those are the other two times that you'd want to stop doing CPR. But really, you become that person's heart that stopped. You become the pump. And so once you stop, the likelihood of that person surviving diminishes significantly. Within 3 minutes, the brain loses all function if
Mm.
you don't get enough oxygen after pumping the heart with CPR. So it's really a hard thing to do in the sense that you don't stop until you get help or until the person starts to come around. And so that can be a tricky situation to be in.
And can you talk more about that? So, it can be intimidating to think about like I'm becoming the heart for this person and having to push hard and push fast. You've done a lot of CPR trainings. How do you help people get over the fear or intimidation about performing CPR?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and we teach a lot of students, middle school kids, high school kids, student athletes, and I think it's so empowerment is key. Buy-in. So first thing we say that anybody can go into cardiac arrest, right? As doctors, there's certain disease processes that only affect certain people. When it comes to cardiac arrest and your heart stopping, anyone's heart can stop. A baby's heart can stop. A grandparent's heart can stop. So once you get people's buy-in to say, "Hey, this could happen to me," people start to listen, even young kids. Someone as young as the age of 9 can comprehend cardiac arrest and the use of CPR, and they have the physical ability and capability to be able to perform CPR. So that's an important thing. Student athletes, the number one cause of death for student athletes is cardiac arrest. The other aspect is that what we found is that people want to help, but they just don't know how. So when you empower them on the steps, on the 4 C's or the 5 C's, and take them through this algorithm and they have tools to use to help them, that also helps people to say, I can help because now I know what to do and I can remember what to do, right? It's not this long, complicated process of what to do. What's really important is when you call 911, what I reassure people is you're no longer on your own. I don't know if people realize or recognize, especially in urban areas, most 911 services and dispatches work off of evidence-based protocols. So they know what to do and how to guide you through CPR. So they will not only be there to let you know when EMS is arriving, but they will stay on the line until you get help, and they will count with
Mm.
you and they will talk to you and they will coach you and they will check to see if you're tired, and if you are, they will cheerlead you on. If anyone has listened to any 911 dispatch call with CPR, you'll recognize that. You keep going, don't stop. EMS is 5 minutes out, you can do this, are you okay? And so that also reassures people that once I call 911 and put them on speaker, even though somebody's not physically there for me, I have somebody who has the knowledge base to kind of support me through this. I'm not doing this on my own in most cases.
I think that is such an important point and not one that I imagine that people often think about, right? You're not on your own. You don't just call 911. They say, hey, all right, we're coming. You can hang up now, right? They stay with you. I think that is very reassuring. So, when you think about a person who can do CPR correctly, like, are there particular skills or traits? It sounds tiring. Do you have to be really strong? What skills does a person need to have in order to correctly perform CPR? Or really, like, can anyone do it?
Really, over the age of 9, a child younger than 9 does not have the physical ability. Imagine like a 9-year-old with like a 6'2", 200-pound father trying to do CPR. But what we do say, you'll see these memes and these TikTok videos of little kids doing CPR. Something is better than nothing. I mean, I think
Mm,
that's the message to come across. Trying to do something, even if it's to try to do CPR and calling 911, is better than just standing there not doing anything. But from a
hmm
physical ability, we know from an evidence-based standpoint, 9 years and above, right? So what is that? Like first, second grade ish? No, second, third grade. So second to third grader can actually have the physical ability to do CPR. So pretty much anyone above that age. What people have to remember too, especially is this if this is a loved one, because 75 to 80% of cardiac arrest happen at home. So, the time that you need CPR is usually in the house. And what does that mean?
mm,
Usually it's a loved one. And so adrenaline amazingly kicks over when
mm,
you're doing CPR on a loved one, or when you're doing CPR at all. You'll be amazed to find out, and there have been studies to show how the adrenaline takes over to provide you that additional energy that you probably wouldn't normally have when you're doing CPR. There is like, this surge of hormones in the way of adrenaline or epinephrine to keep you going both mentally and physically. And then when you get to the end, you're just exhausted because then it's kind of all settled out. So it's amazing how the body kind of kicks over to help you to do the work. And so you don't have to be an athlete to do CPR. And we have been able to, if we have older people, we've shown folks how to do it if they, only have one arm, or if they have to kneel a certain way, if they can't be on their knees, they can sit a certain way, as long as their arms are straight, and their hands are interlocked and positioned between the two nipples, and they're pushing hard and fast. There are kind of ways to maneuver and adjust. Again, doing something is better than doing nothing.
So can you tell us more about those trainings? You've been doing CPR trainings with your organization, Akoma United. And anyone who follows you on social media sees you like jet setting. You're in Ghana, you're in Hollywood, you're in Pittsburgh, kind of all over the place, either doing trainings or getting recognized and celebrated for all the work that you're doing. So how do you decide what groups to train? Like, where is there the need, for example? And then what do your trainings actually entail?
So Dr. Falusi, thank you for bringing that up. So we know that communities of color and women and children, your marginalized communities, your immigrant communities, are the folks least likely to receive CPR, and therefore are the folks who have the worst outcomes or least positive outcomes from cardiac arrest. Again, as a reminder, cardiac arrest can happen to anyone at any time. It does decipher between race, ethnicity, gender, age. Anyone can have cardiac arrest. But unfortunately, secondary to this, such things as institution of racism and prejudice, communities of color, no matter whether they're in a white neighborhood or a Black neighborhood, even in their own neighborhood, are less likely to receive CPR. And we know that. Women, because they have breast, and folks are afraid that they might be considered to be assaulting the woman, if they touch their breast, or they might be sued or something along those lines, don't want to touch women. And so when you think about that, that could be your mom, your aunt, your niece, your sister, right? And so those are the communities that we like to focus on, and the kids. But ultimately, ideally, in thinking about performing CPR, and the only way you can really stop is whether that person is revived or whether you get help. The ideal situation is that if everybody knew how to do CPR, then you wouldn't be doing it forever. Eventually, somebody would come along and help you to do CPR. So I say that to say
So
that
true.
so we have a global look at this of like, my bigger vision is that everybody, if you go to Taiwan, or if you go to Tanzania and somebody goes into cardiac arrest, someone in the room or someone in the space knows how to do CPR. But it is very important to know that our marginalized communities suffer worsening outcomes because of something that can be simply done in the way of CPR that's just not done, for various reasons. Education being one, empowerment, people being afraid to hurt somebody or do more damage than good, racism, people being afraid of assaulting women. There's something that everybody should know. It's called the Good Samaritan Law. It's in all 50 states. That law states that if you are going with good intention to help somebody, especially in a life-threatening situation, you are not liable. So if that person has broken ribs, if they have bruises all over their body, if they don't make it, if they pass away and you attempted CPR, if you have provided a life-saving CPR and they don't make it, you are not liable. You are a hero. And so I think there's this fear out there that, I'm going to do more damage than good. But again, like I've said several times already, doing something is better than doing nothing. And the Good Samaritan Law allows you to do the something.
That's such a good reminder that you're not liable for the outcomes. And also the reminder too that you're not necessarily putting yourself at risk, right? If you're doing it correctly, and hopefully you have help, you're not putting yourself at risk. One thing that you said earlier that you emphasized is hand position and pushing hard. You did not say anything about giving breaths. That's one thing that has definitely changed with CPR over the last few years. So I wanted to see if you can say a little bit more about that piece. I think that also may be something that makes people shy away. Wait, CPR, aren't I supposed to put my mouth on the other person's mouth and give them breath, give them 2 breaths? And is that putting my health at risk? So can you talk a little bit about how that has changed?
No, this is great, especially in the day and age of COVID, the COVID pandemic, and now, we're in respiratory season with flu and RSV and all these things, and people are like, you know what? I'm good on that end. Yes, we no longer, the evidence, particularly for adults. I have to specify for adults, and I would put teenagers or adolescents in that bracket. Hands only CPR has been shown from an evidence-based perspective to increase the survival from cardiac arrest 2 to 3 times. So yes, we no longer need to give breaths. Getting that heart pumped is really important. Getting that heart started is really important. What happens is what I want to relay to people is when your heart stops and you go into cardiac arrest. And I think this is what makes it confusing, because in the media, there's all these kind of terms: cardiac arrest, heart attack, all this stuff. Cardiac arrest is simply an umbrella to say that your heart has stopped. And when your heart has stopped, you are officially dead. And so that also empowers people to say, okay, this person is dead and I have an opportunity to bring them back to life. They're not like sort of kind of dead, they're dead. And so it is very important to get that heart started. The oxygen in your body when you die, when your heart stops, you have an oxygen reservoir that hangs out from maybe about anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. And at the 5 minutes, I'm being very generous. So you have very little time to get oxygen to the brain by being the heart and oxygen to the rest of the body. That's what keeps people alive. And so by performing CPR quickly, you're able to use that oxygen reservoir to the brain, because you want to replenish the brain with oxygen, and to the heart and the rest of the body. So it's very important that you start on that right away. But that is enough, because you have that oxygen reservoir. That is enough. You no longer need to give breaths for older children and adults. Now, I will say for children, for kids, for infants, toddlers, and school-age children, it's a little bit different. The number one reason why their hearts usually stop is because they have a respiratory problem and their lungs stop. So usually their lungs stop first. They have not enough oxygen, or they've retained too much carbon dioxide, and so they still need breaths. But again, to the point that I've made throughout this entire podcast, doing something is better than nothing. So I would say that if you're hesitant to give breaths and it's a child that is in front of you that has gone into cardiac arrest or is not breathing properly, it is okay and strongly encouraged to do hands-only CPR, to not have to do the breaths. Something is better than nothing. Now, if you're a parent and that's your child, you can feel free to give breaths. And again, there are certain institutions such as the American Heart Association, the American Red Cross, that can give you specifics on the ratios of chest compressions to breaths. But for the global public, hands-only CPR, if somebody is out of the hospital and goes into cardiac arrest, is the way to go. We also no longer need to check the pulse. Evidence shows that we as physicians are bad at checking the pulse. We can't check the pulse accurately.
That's terrible.
Yes, it's true. So why would we ask somebody else who doesn't do this for a living to check a pulse? So if somebody goes down outside of the hospital in cardiac arrest, you no longer need to give breaths. If they're a teenager or adult, you no longer need to check a pulse. And I would argue, even if it's a child and you don't know what to do, just start go through your C's and start hands-only CPR. Somebody will come to help to give the rescue breaths for a child, for an infant, toddler, or school-age child.
Excellent. That is so helpful. And we'll link to some videos, as you mentioned, on how to do CPR, the ratios and different ages, on our show notes and our website at hippocratichost.com. We will also link in our show notes to your website for many reasons, one of which is that you have this amazing compilation of CPR playlists. So if you find it hard to remember, 100 to 120 beats per minute, how do I really know if I'm doing it fast enough? Well, Dr. Owusu-Ansah has got a song for you. In fact, many songs. So I'll put that teaser out there. If you want to know what I'm talking about, just go to our show notes, and then you'll see the link there for the CPR playlists. So my last question for you, Dr. Owusu-Ansah, is for all the people that are now motivated and inspired by what you have told us and want to get out there to get trained in CPR, what is the next step that they should do today, right now, to start to get trained in CPR?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, there are many local organizations in your own communities and towns. Some of the big national organizations that people know about is American Heart Association. So you can go to the American Heart Association website or the American Red Cross website, and you can enter in your zip code, and they can tell you where there are certain types of classes to learn various aspects of life-saving skills, including CPR. There are also local agencies and brands like our own Akoma United in Pittsburgh that will come and train you where you are.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Owusu-Ansah, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really so inspiring, eye-opening, educational in CPR, and just want to uplift your messages on something is better than nothing, and really almost everyone can do something toward saving another person's life. So thank you so much. Thanks so much to Dr. Sylvia Owusu-Ansah for joining us today. Share this episode and our show notes at hippocratichost.com with your friends and family so that we can reach that goal where everyone is trained in CPR so that each person, including you, will be surrounded by people trained and ready to help when needed. Thank you as always for listening and for all your support. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and other major social media platforms, and subscribe and review us on Apple Podcasts because reviewing helps other people like you find the show. And if you'd like to support us with a monthly donation, just go to our website at hippocratichost.com and click on the Become a Friend of the Show button. We'll be forever grateful. Thanks, everyone, and talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to Health at Home with the Hippocratic hosts. Remember that all views expressed here are our own, not our employers, and all content is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice, nor the establishment of a doctor-patient relationship. Always consult your own physician or healthcare team for any medical issues.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate us, subscribe, and tell a friend. And check out our website at www.hippocratichosts.com for show notes on this and all our episodes. Can't wait to chat with you next time.